Tonight, Congress is back in session, bringing with it the Jeffrey Epstein saga.
This is not a partisan issue. This is a crime, the crime of sex trafficking, and the criminals must be held accountable.
Survivors seek justice as lawmakers on both sides of the aisle call for transparency into the Justice Department's investigation of the convicted sex offender. Plus, military might on display. Thousands of Chinese soldiers march through the streets of Beijing as the leaders of Russia, North Korea, and China unite. The meaning behind the show of force and what the United Front means for the Western world. And a place of refuge for our nation's leaders.
Sometimes you just need to get off Capitol Hill, right? And you need a place where people they know you for who you are, not the title that's with your name.
The ministry bringing peace, prayers, and spiritual guidance to lawmakers. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Silent and alone no more. Sexual abuse survivors stand together to speak out. From CBN's Washington News Bureau, I'm John Jessup. Well, one by one on the steps of the United States Capitol, women reclaimed their voices and recounted the emotional and often horrific details of how they were lured into abuse by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, some when they were as young as 13 years old. For many, today was the first time they spoke out publicly, coming out of the shadows and breaking their silence to demand justice and accountability, pressuring Republicans and Democrats in Congress, as well as President Trump, to release more information.
I was only 14 years old when my friend brought me over to Jeffrey Epstein's house in Palm Beach. I remember crying the entire way home, thinking about how I couldn't ever tell anyone about what actually happened in that house.
There are many pieces of my story that I can't remember, no matter how hard I try. But it's so hard to begin to heal knowing that there are people out there who know more about my abuse than I do.
I am no longer weak. I am no longer powerless. And I'm no longer alone. You have a choice. Stand with the truth or with the lies that have protected predators for decades.
Progressives, independents, moderates, and yes, MAGA supporters to demand truth and justice.
Today, we are coming forward and we are going to fight like hell for these women, because we have to fight like hell for those that are enduring sexual abuse and are living in a prison of shame.
This is not a hoax. This is real. There are real survivors. They are brave. I hope they encourage other survivors to come forward and to tell their stories.
Some of the statements today at the U.S. Capitol. Let's bring in CBN senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright. Kelly, those survivors convened an emotionally charged news conference at the steps of the U.S. Capitol, and it brought together some strange bedfellows. Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and Tom Massey, and Democrat Ro Khanna. Now, some of the survivors directly called on President Trump to use the power of his office to release the files. Kelly, I know you've been at the White House. What has been his response?
Well, John, getting back to what those survivors talked about, it was very emotional, and I'm so glad that you were able to play a lot of that. But here at the White House, a lot of people had been hoping that the president was listening with a sensitive ear. It turns out that he went on to state and doubled down on the fact that he believes that all of this is based on a hoax and that it's a ruse by the Democrats to actually weaken or tarnish the image of his presidency and the success that he's been having since coming into office. With that, this is what he stated in the Oval Office about what's unfolding with these survivors.
I understand that we were subpoenaed to give files, and I understand we've given thousands of pages of files. And I know that no matter what you do, it's going to keep going. And I think it's enough, because I think we should talk about the greatness of our country and the success that we're having. We're having the most successful 8 months of any president ever. And that's what I want to talk about. That's what we should be talking about, not the Epstein hoax.
And John, if I can add, some of the supporters of the president who I spoke to Some of them have stated that the president missed a moment today, that he missed a moment to actually be sensitive and show some sensitivity to these survivors who boldly and courageously came forward to tell their stories, and called upon him to actually help them in releasing the unredacted files of the Epstein files.
Kelly, you heard just in that sound bite that the president wants to talk about some of his successes, one of which he currently highlights is Washington, D.C., with the federalization of the police force here. President Trump is moving ahead with plans to send in the National Guard and federal agents to other places like Chicago and Baltimore, even though a judge ruled that that was illegal when he did it earlier this year in Los Angeles. What more can you tell us about that and potential legal battles ahead?
Look, the president remains very firm on his commitment to establish law and order in American cities, and that is to restore a reduction of crime, as he has done here in Washington, D.C., making the national capital the stellar example of how that can work. Looking beyond that, however, he is looking at Chicago, where he faces a lot of resistance, as well as Baltimore and even New Orleans. But the president is doubling down, saying that he will move forward. He's considering that, and if he sends troops there, he states that he believes he can eradicate the crime problems in Chicago, New Orleans, and Baltimore within a matter of 2 weeks once he puts in the National Guard. In terms of what legalities he'll face, he'll say he'll deal with that later. The problem is crime, and he wants to do something about it. And there are some people on the ground who say, we welcome you, Mr. President. So let's see what happens.
One last question, if I can squeeze it in. So the Trump administration wants to tout its claim of taking out narco-terrorists on a Venezuelan drug boat. Today, there are mounting questions, though, about rules of engagement and how the administration hasn't really given any evidence to prove that these were gang members that were on board that boat. How is the White House responding to those claims?
Well, I can tell you that there is some speculation that there may have been a violation of international law, but the president states this. I'm reading from his Truth Social. He says, earlier this morning, on my orders, U.S. military forces conducted a kinetic strike against positively identified Trinidad narco terrorists in the Southcom area. So he states that the U.S. military knew who they were attacking, identified them, and stated that they had to take them out. They took out 11 members of that on that military strike. And again, in terms of questions if they violated international orders, law, we will see as the president continues to move forward and the White House continues to move forward with what's happening off the coast of Venezuela. All
right, CBN senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright, always keeping us abreast of the latest at the White House. Thanks so much, Kelly.
You're welcome.
Well, up next, China, Russia, and North Korea unite on the world stage. The military show of force and what it means for the United States when Faith Nation returns. Well, tonight, a show of force in Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping hosting the country's largest ever military parade, inviting ringside seats for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin seen publicly together for the very first time. The parade marked 80 years since the end of World War II and showcased China's latest weapons, from hypersonic missiles to stealth fighters and drones. In Washington, President Trump accused China's Xi of conspiring against the United States. Putin quickly denying those claims, saying he doesn't want a confrontation with the West. After the parade, Putin and Kim held a bilateral meeting, with the Russian leader thanking North Korea for sending soldiers to fight against Ukraine. Joining our Faith Nation panel now, Gordon Chang, a China analyst with the Gates Stone Institute, and CBN senior international correspondent George Thomas. Gentlemen, welcome back to Faith Nation. Gordon, starting with you. So President Trump responding to Xi, Putin, and Kim standing together, presenting a united front at the parade, accusing them of conspiring against the U.S. Is this a real alliance or more of a symbolic show of defiance toward Washington?
It is becoming an alliance, and what we are seeing over time is that the bonds among these three regimes are hardening. So, for instance, there are now North Korean troops in Ukraine, but there are also Chinese troops as well. So there really is a coordination among these three. And, you know, we can call it a conspiracy or we can call it something else, but nonetheless, it's dangerous to the West. And it's dangerous to the United States as well.
George, the optics are what they are. How concerning should they be for people? And then also, what do you think it means as these leaders forge closer ties as a counterbalance to the United States and the West?
I mean, look, I think we've been seeing that for quite some time. And you look at this military parade, it's not necessarily proof to those who may be watching these scenes to say that there's an imminent invasion of the island of Taiwan. But it does reinforce this idea, John, that China is preparing for that option. And, and Gordon knows this, and I've been reporting from China for many, many years. Symbolism matters, and military parades in China are a deliberate political theater. And it's more than just a chance for the Chinese to domestically chest thump. But this is also sending a message to the United States, sending a message to Taiwan that we have a panoply of weapons at our disposal. And clearly this whole phrase, the whole idea, I think it was the announcer during the Chinese military parade, he says, we can basically engage on all battle spheres and battle spaces rather. And clearly for the Chinese, for them to take over Taiwan, they are going to need to, rely more than just on naval or air superiority. They're going to actually have to focus on cyber and space. And what's interesting is that there were about 10,000 soldiers who marched yesterday on Tiananmen Square, and I've been there many times. Among those forces marching were China's cyberspace force and aerospace force. Those are new arms of the Chinese military just established last year. Again, it shows that in order to take Taiwan, they have to be able to go to these various aspects of a military operation in potential of taking the island.
Gordon, two-part question for you. Do you think this parade signals that China intends to invade Taiwan imminently? And then also with Putin openly thanking Kim for sending troops and equipment in support of the war in Ukraine, what do you think Russia and North Korea each gained from tightening this bond? And could China risk being dragged into the partnership?
I think China actually masterminded this relationship of North Korea sending artillery shells, short-range ballistic missiles, and soldiers to the front in Ukraine because it supports Chinese foreign policy of keeping Russia in the war. And also it means that China has to provide less aid to North Korea. So this is a win-win for China, especially because nobody is actually criticizing Beijing at the moment. The other thing, this could be Taiwan, but it could also be any other country in the region. And we have seen some very belligerent Chinese activity in the South China Sea at places like Scarborough Shoal and Second Thomas Shoal. And I think that if a war starts in East Asia, it's probably not going to start in Taiwan for a lot of reasons. I think that it probably starts against the Philippines or some other claimant in the South China Sea.
We know that a lot of attention has been built around the South China Sea with China building those islands. George, I want to shift gears a little bit more here. So Iran's president also is attending the Beijing summit. How significant is Iran's presence there?
Yeah, I mean, you got to give some context to this summit. I mean, outside of the Asia Rim, this coming together of these leaders called the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It was started by the Chinese back in 2001 and included the Russians, the Chinese, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. And then in 2017, it added a whole bunch of other countries, including India and Pakistan. Iran was added to this SCO organization back in 2023. Incidentally, in 2024, Iran joined what's called the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, Iran, India, and China. What you're seeing today is that, as the Iranian regime becomes more and more isolated by the West, Iran is turning east, right? So it's turning to China, it's turning to Russia, it's turning to India, it's turning to other Eastern nations as a way to placate the various blockades, the various sanctions that have been levied against the regime. Again, you see a multipolar world that's emerging, right? The BRIC countries, the SCO countries, basically standing on one side of the table, in essence, anti-Western, anti-American, anti-Europe, and then the rest of this various unusual bedfellows who are coming together, the Russians, the Chinese, the Indians, the North Koreans, again, makes for a very multipolar world and makes the whole process of negotiating with these countries all the more difficult.
We just have a few seconds left, Gordon. I want to ask you, as George mentioned, you have BRIC, you have the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, and about half a dozen or a dozen or more countries that are attending. What's that the response of? Is it because of, of course, this has been going on for a while, but have we seen the alliance, the hardening form because of what's going on with tariffs? And how should the United States respond?
A number of countries want to join these organizations, but these organizations are not effective. They issue press releases, but they do very little else. And so the problem here for China, as they add more and more countries, these organizations become even less effective. For the United States, I think that what we just need to do is to strengthen our economy, strengthen our military, because if we do that, these countries will bandwagon with us.
All right.
These countries want to go with the winner, and we've got to show the world that we are the winner.
We're going to have to leave it right there. George Thomas and Gordon Chang, thank you so much for your insights tonight.
Thank you.
Well, turning now to the Middle East, new reporting from the Associated Press claims Iran was building up its stockpile of weapons-grade uranium before Israel launched that unprecedented strike on June 13th. The report, based on a confidential UN nuclear watchdog document, reveals Iran had more than 970 pounds of uranium enriched to 60%, a short step away from the 9% level needed to make a nuclear bomb. To put that in perspective, experts say it only takes 90 pounds at that level to produce a single atomic bomb. The report also notes Iran and the IAEA still haven't agreed on inspections of sites damaged by the joint Israeli and U.S. strikes in June. It remains unclear just how much those strikes set back Iran's nuclear program. Well, coming up, faith on Capitol Hill, how one ministry is helping members of Congress find support and strength beyond politics. Welcome back. As Congress returns to Washington, lawmakers face long days, difficult decisions, and tremendous pressure from many sides. One ministry is helping the faithful find a safe space where they can take a break from the daily grind and receive spiritual support. CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London brings us the story.
In American politics, those on Capitol Hill work to find common ground in a vastly divided nation. It's why Kimberly Gannow and her husband Randy created a place of refuge here known as the Alabaster House.
We just happen to be on the front lines right there, really honestly hearing from heaven.
And taking what they hear to serve on behalf of Congress, a mission the Gannows have dedicated themselves to for 27 years.
When they come to Washington, they're so excited about being elected, the campaign, all the hard work, they kind of take a little breather. But we're here to also remind them that they do have an actual target on their back now.
On the Hill in the late 90s, Kimberly sensed a desperate need for those elected to Congress and entering a new world. Here, they had no real community, outlet, or prayer partners when fighting for or against policy.
There is a constant ask on their lives, time and time again, where they actually, they're never treated as an individual, as an actual human being.
The Gannows worked over the years to change that by creating a safe space for members where they could build their faith while strengthening their family. While the Alabaster House isn't a physical building, Kimberly and her staff provide a variety of services to help ease those daily burdens often faced by members and their spouses. They range from weekly chapels and drop-in prayer to holiday dinners, even marriage retreats on a lake house.
That's a really perfect time for actual spouses to get away, hear from God, and then kind of almost recalibrate.
These moments are desperately needed, according to Georgia Representative Barry Loudermilk, who says physical threats against members of Congress are higher than they've been in a decade.
Literally physical stress of being careful, walking down the street. People show up at your homes protesting, at your offices, and you never know when that First Amendment right that they're exercising turns violent these days.
Loudermilk and his wife Desiree lean on the ministry team for its spiritual support, accountability, and true godly friendships.
Can you share the impact that Alabaster House has had in your home, your family, and just helping you with decision making?
Well, it's been a place to, sometimes you just need to get off Capitol Hill, right? And you need a place where people just, they know you for who you are, not the title that's with your name.
Illinois Representative Mike Bost and his wife Tracy joined 4 years ago, looking for fellowship with other believers.
In Congress, there are a lot of decisions to be made, and there's a lot of prayer that you need. Not every decision in Congress is a moral one, but your actions have to be moral.
What's a memory or highlight you've had on the Hill during these events?
We have prayer times, and it is just an opportunity in a very, very stressful place to seek something you don't normally have, and that's peace and quiet, and sometimes you got to shut down.
Those prayers inside of our nation's capital continue to yield powerful results. In addition to helping lawmakers, Kimberly felt prompted by the Holy Spirit to stand with her staff in the halls interceding on the Hill before catastrophic events, including prayer the night before the 9/11 attacks rocked our nation.
We started praying for the president at the time, like protection over our country, like all of this wisdom and things like this, and also over the Capitol. And we all know that, that airplane was actually scheduled to hit the Capitol instead of those fields in Pennsylvania.
Where do you see Alabaster House going in the next 10, 20 years?
When they leave and go back to their home state, we also want them supported there. So that Alabaster House ambassador can be making those prayer appointments just like we are doing here in Washington, D.C. in their home state. So we're actually looking for 535 either pastors or ministry leaders that can come and support and link arms with us in this mission field.
Michelle London, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Michelle. Well, coming up, a little boy's breakfast adventure ends with a police escort. We explain next on Faith Nation. Finally tonight, I love this story. A Florida boy may have just earned himself the title of Chick-fil-A's biggest fan. Now, there's nothing too unusual about a 5-year-old enjoying his Chick-fil-A breakfast. What caught employees' attention, though, is that this boy was there alone. Little William snuck out of his home one morning while his parents were still asleep in bed so that he could grab breakfast. Staff treated him to a sandwich while police asked the boy if he could show them how to get back home, which thankfully he was able to do.
I walked him to the back of my patrol car.
Are you going to get me in jail?
No, I'm not going to put you in jail.
William was reunited with his stunned parents who say they think he understood the seriousness of what he had done. So the very next time that he returned to Chick-fil-A, he came with his parents and the police officers who brought him home. And you know what? I get a craving for Chick-fil-A breakfast every now and then, so can't blame little William. I think he has great taste. Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have a great night, and we'll see you right back here again tomorrow.